Today we're going to go over the installation of an all-plastic bolt retainer for a Barnett Crossbow. Now as an example we're using the Barnett Razor, but this will be roughly the same installation process no matter what Barnett Crossbow you have, as long as your Barnett Crossbow uses an all-plastic bolt retainer. If your Barnett Crossbow uses a metal or an overmolded metal bolt retainer, you'll want to see our other installation video for the installation of a metal or an overmolded metal bolt retainer. Now this process is pretty simple. We're going to go ahead and show you the simple steps, and when we're done we're going to run over a few reasons that the arrow retainers break and how to avoid it. So before we get started, you're going to want to have a few things on hand to make sure this process goes quickly and efficiently. So first you're going to want to have your new arrow retainer or bolt retainer. You'll also want to have a large screwdriver, and you'll want to have your Allen wrenches that came with your crossbow. There's a very small one and the next size up. If you no longer have the Allen wrenches that came with your crossbow, that's okay. They're just standard Allen wrenches. You just have to make sure you have the correct size. You'll also want to have a set of instructions that give you step-by-step directions on how to install these. And also you'll need one of your arrows that you use. Now this is a really simple process. We're going to get started. First off, you're going to want to remove the scope. Yeah, I know. You remove the scope, that means you're going to have to re-sight it in. But there's no other option. So this is where you might use your large screwdriver, and you'll have to loosen up the scope mount screws. You may be able to get them by hand, but that large screwdriver will come in handy. And then you'll loosen these up. Now, once you get them loose enough, you'll be able to take the scope right off of the scope rail. And you'll notice if you go too far, you can actually take these all the way off. Now, that's not a problem. You just have to make sure that the part gets back on the correct way. So once you do that, you set the scope off to the side, and the next step is to remove the scope mount rail. Now there's two screws in the scope mount rail, and you're going to need to use your Allen wrench. So you're going to loosen those up. They may be a little tight, so it may take a little bit of pressure to loosen them up. So once you get those to break loose, you're going to take them, and then you're going to start loosening them up the rest of the way. Once you start that process, you might want to hold the old arrow retainer in place, or if there's a piece left up in there, because as noted in the directions, you may want to note which hole of the arrow retainer has the screw through it. Once that's loose, it'll come right up, and you'll be able to hold on to it, and you can see on the bottom side that this arrow retainer actually has the bolt through the front hole. So you're going to take the broken part, even if it's just the little piece back here, you're going to take the old one out, and you're going to put the new one back in place. So you take the new one and you put it back in the exact same spot. Once you do that, you're going to bring it up and start to set the screws back in where they go. Then you're going to use your Allen wrench, and you're going to start to tighten these screws in. Now you want to be careful. They should screw in very easily. You want to make sure that you don't get them cross-threaded. If they start screwing in too tough, you may have them cross-threaded. But once you get them started, you should be all set. So then you'll want to tighten those down in order to make sure that your scope rail doesn't come loose. There should be a small amount of Loctite left on there from the original installation, so that should help in the process. And once you tighten those down, then you're going to want to move to your next step. The next step is to make sure that your tension is correct on the bolt retainer. Now, for the sake of the process, we're going to use a Barnett EVAC decocker in order to show you the process of checking the tension of the arrow retainer. Now, if you didn't change bolts or arrows, if you didn't change the actual one you were using, there may not be any adjustment needed here. This is just something to check on, because you want to make sure that the tension of the arrow retainer or bolt retainer is correct, because if it's too loose, your arrows will just slide out, but if it's too tight, you could actually cause your arrows to lift with too much pressure on the back side as they come out off of the rail. They could lift up, and that could cause inaccuracies in your shot. So if you need to make an adjustment, this is an inset screw right here, and you're going to use that inset screw. If you turn it left, it'll loosen the head of the bolt retainer. If you turn it right, it'll tighten it. You want to have just enough tightness that when you tip the crossbow forward, the arrow doesn't fall out, and you want to have just enough that it also is not holding down too hard on the arrow. Once you have that tension set to where it needs to be at, and as I said, you may not need to make any adjustment if you didn't change arrows, then you're going to replace your scope mount, and if you kind of knew where it was at before, you'll be able to put it back in essentially the same spot as you had it before. And once you do that, it'll go right on, and you can tighten them down. And if you don't feel like your fingers are strong enough, you can use once you have it, you're sure it's in place where you want it, you can tighten it down a little with the screwdriver. So that's pretty much the installation process. You'll need to re-sight in your crossbow. Now, we said we'd go over a few things on how to avoid breaking these arrow retainers in the future. Now, we noticed a few people have broken their arrow retainers by the cocking device coming back and actually catching the arrow retainer and breaking it off. That happens sometimes if you're not paying attention when cocking the crossbow. We have also seen a few people break their arrow retainers by lifting their arrow too soon when hand unloading the arrow, and lifting and breaking off the arrow retainer back in here. We've also seen a few people who have broken the arrow retainer by resting their cranking device on top of this arrow retainer. That puts too much pressure down, and it'll break the arrow retainer back in here. We've seen a few people who have fallen in the woods or just not paid attention when they were handling their crossbow, and they push too much pressure sideways on this arrow retainer. That will also break it. But as long as you're careful, you can shoot a Barnett crossbow many times without breaking your arrow retainer. The times that it gets broken mostly come with being careless. So if you're very careful and you pay attention to what you're doing, you can shoot a lot of shots without breaking your arrow retainer. We hope these tips have helped, and we hope that the installation video has been very helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And thanks for watching.